Hey everyone, I'm Coach Kai Uchimura. I'm the host of Soccerpedia. I'm excited to have Jason Longshore rejoin the podcast. This is his second time on the podcast. He was here about a month and a half ago. For those that don't know, Jason Longshore is a color commentator for Atlanta United for 92.9 The Game. He knows a lot about Atlanta soccer history, and so I hope you guys enjoy the episode. And without further ado, enjoy the show. Hey, how's it going, Jason?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. It's been about a month and a half, and a lot has happened since Atlanta United got back from the MLS's back tournament. So first and foremost, what has been your take on the MLS's back tournament and how Atlanta United, how that went for them?
Well, the tournament as a whole has been great. I think it's been really difficult, just getting the tournament together. And you have to give MLS, I think, a lot of credit in finding a way to do it and a way to do it safely. And we saw with Nashville, we saw with Dallas, how hard that could be in market right now. And we're seeing it in Major League Baseball right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult. The bubble idea worked, and I think it wasn't a cheap way to do it at all. It's expensive, and MLS getting it done, it's a credit to the league. It's been a fun tournament. It's been some really good matches. Some new stars have emerged. Some new teams have emerged. Atlanta wasn't one of them. Atlanta really struggled, and we've seen everything that's come out since with Frank de Boer, leaving the club. Mutual consent is the way it was announced. It wasn't working, and the Columbus game, that last game, was the one where I think that was driven home because it's a must-win match. And the crazy thing is, if you had won that match, even 1-0, they would have went through into the knockout round.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else fell their way. But in the must-win game, to come out as flat as he did, then to fall behind and have no response until halftime, something's not right. And I don't think it's an easy answer. I don't think it's just Frank de Boer. I don't think it's just tactics. I don't think it's just because Joseph Martinez is injured. I don't think it's just because there's new faces. I think it's a lot of things that add up to a team that didn't play as well as it should have.
Mm-hmm. So do you see any signs of, let's say, or I heard there's, of course, rumors about different coaches that are pipped in to be the next coach. Of course, right now it's Stephen Glass that was promoted from LA United 2s. Where do you see Coach Glass's tenure? Do you think it's just for the rest of the season, or do you think LA United is rapidly trying to find somebody for within the next 2 or 3 games?
They're definitely looking. I don't think it'll be soon. I think the pandemic makes it really difficult, in terms of what's an interview process going to look like? What's the interest going to be from people outside the country coming to the United States right now? How quick could they get into the country right now? There's so many things that we're just not used to even being part of the conversation. So I'm not expecting it will be quick. I think in some ways that's good. I think Atlanta United needs to take their time here. This is a big hire.
Yeah.
It's a bigger job than it was when Frank de Boer was hired. It's a much bigger job than it was when Tata Martino was hired. It's a big deal. And I think as we see, even, with Frank de Boer's tenure resulting in 2 trophies and a third place finish in the league last year, there's a higher bar set now. So the hire has to be correct. That's not going to happen quickly. There's managers who are out of work right now that I'm sure have been interested in the job. There's managers who have jobs right now who I'm sure would have interest, and I'm sure that the team has interest in people in both categories. But you're lucky to have somebody like Stephen Glass in the family right now to be able to take over, and he's the right personality for it. Stephen is somebody who has played at the highest of levels, in the Premier League with Newcastle. He's played at different levels. He's coached at different levels. And he also understands the young players that this team, has as its hallmark, having worked with a number of them through Atlanta United too. So he's the right personality to get the most out of the group as it's currently constructed. And that gives the club time to go out and fulfill a hiring process at a time where, I don't know what the hiring process would have been in a normal time. But right now, it's got to be longer. It's just got to be more difficult than anybody would ever really, truly know at the moment because of so many different questions that come up just about the logistics.
I was about to ask what can fans and people expect in a Coach Glass for the meantime about his coaching philosophy. Of course, he's coming from LA United 2, where the average age of the squad is in the early 20s, late teens, and so
Yeah.
of course one shouldn't just look at LA United 2's actual record, because they didn't. Of course, if you look at it by wins and points, they didn't do all that great their inaugural season. But of course, that's not the purpose of why that team is around for. It's mainly for development. So I was just going to ask, what should we expect from Coach Glass as far as tactics, philosophy, style of play? What do you think?
I think a lot of that's to be determined, and a lot of it, we're going to get to learn that along with Stephen Glass, because his job with Atlanta United too, you nailed it. It's not just to go win games. I'm always reminded of youth managers or second team managers in big clubs around the world who talk about how they measure their success based off the number of players they put in first team kits, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is. So you look at Steven, he got George Campbell ready to
Mm-hmm.
go to sign a homegrown deal last year when nobody expected that. Lawrence Wyke has played in MLS this year. He was a USL signing last year.
Mm-hmm.
George Bellows continued development. There's a lot of things to point to that Stephen Glass has done his job effectively with Atlanta United too. In terms of tactics, he's had to mirror a lot of what the first team has done.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly, because you have different personnel, but if you're preparing players to play for the first team, you're not going to sit and bunker and counter when the first team is playing in a possession style.
Mm-hmm.
You have to play in a way that is close to what the first team's doing.
Mm-hmm.
The differences I can see just from having conversations with Steven about, kind of his philosophy, he's definitely going to want to make it difficult for the opponent to play. He's
Mm-hmm.
definitely going to ask his players to be disruptive, to step up and press. And I think the question is going to be, how does he take the way he sees the game and adapt it to this roster? Because that's always the hard thing for a manager, is you can have your way of thinking, your most preferred way to play, but if it doesn't match the players you have, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to take those ideas of wanting to play fast, wanting to be, disruptive to the opposition, wanting to impose your style on them, but also adapt to, players who you have to get the best out of a Pity Martinez. You have to get the
Mm-hmm.
best out of a Fernando Meza. You have to get the
Mm-hmm.
best out of the talent that you have, and you have to combine the two in a way that does get results, because now that's part of his job. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the number one thing with his job with Atlanta United 2. Now it is the number one thing, is to get results and get this team back into a better playoff position.
Mm. And speaking of playoffs, has MLS even announced like what the rest of the season after the MLS back tournament will be like?
Not yet. I think with the moves that we're seeing with Atlanta, putting Joseph Martinez on the season-ending injury list, adding Kubo Torres,
Yeah.
the rumors around the league, there will be some kind of a season. But for MLS, it's hard. I think you have to look at what's going on with Major League Baseball and the issues
Yeah.
that the Miami Marlins are having, now the St. Louis Cardinals. They're playing in markets. MLS wants to do what
Mm-hmm.
Major League Baseball is doing to a degree. We've seen some issues with USL Championship,
Mm-hmm.
with NISA as well. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
difficult. It's
Yeah.
just we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
It's hard to deal with what's going on, and MLS has to find that balance between playing a season, recouping what revenue they can. They're not going to make the revenue off of game day tickets, at least not to full capacity. There's just no way across the league that's going to happen. But they also have to find a way to make it safe and the
Mm-hmm.
expenses that go along with that. And now they have to deal with the issues that we're seeing in markets, but also with Canada,
Mm-hmm.
because, I
Yeah.
mean, Toronto Blue Jays can't play in Canada right now.
Yeah.
They've been able to solve that. You have Toronto FC, you have the Montreal Impact, you have the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like they're going to play a round robin against one another
Mm-hmm.
to start things off, and that could happen in the next few weeks. But then at some point, either you're going to have to be able to come back and forth across the Canadian border, or
Yeah.
those teams are going to have to set up in the United States to play league matches. It's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of challenges, and I don't know if MLS has all the answers yet, or maybe even knows all the questions yet that are going to come up.
Mm. And So when we talked about, or when you mentioned earlier about trying for Stephen Glass to get the most out of Pity Martinez and Meza, when it comes to rumors about a permanent hire as a coach, of course, the name first people's minds was Marcelo Gallardo from River Plate. And of course, he worked with Pity Martinez. What do you think the likelihood of securing somebody like Marcelo Gallardo on a permanent basis in the future, or is that still way up in the air?
It's up in the air. I mean, he's somebody who's got to be on your list and you've got to talk to and at least sound it out, because he's a talented manager and he's had incredible success at River Plate, and he has a connection to, one of your top players in Pity Martinez, who loved playing for him. So you've got to initiate that conversation, and I'd be crazy to think that they haven't. Gallardo was reportedly in the running for the Miami job, ultimately didn't really progress too deep into those conversations. It's a different time now. He's played in this country. He's been in this country before, played for DC United. So that helps. He also has big ambitions, and he's being talked about in big ways from people like Pep Guardiola, from Del Bosque, the former Spanish international manager, who say that he's ready for a big European job. Is he going to get a big European job right now, or does he want to feel like coming to Atlanta could be a stepping stone? Or does he want to go to a smaller European club as a stepping stone? I do think he'll leave River Plate in the next year to 18 months. He's done everything he can do there. The only thing he hasn't done is won a league title, but two Libertadores titles probably make up for that. They did really collapse in the league this past year, and does he want to try to right that before he leaves? I don't know. The economy in Argentina is really difficult at the moment as well. They don't have a restart date for the league. He might want to go to a different place, but while the economy here is better, the virus issues are really not. So I don't know. I think it's going to be tough to get him, because I think maybe his destiny is Europe, and this could push him to Europe even quicker. But you've got to try, because he's a very talented up-and-coming manager.
And of course, the hunt for manager has not been the only question and issue. Of course, you had plenty of injury issues with Joseph Martinez, and now another question was not just getting another coach, but of course finding a kind of a stopgap filler up top, and we got that with Eric Cubo Torres. What do you make of that signing?
I think it's a great signing because he became available. Anybody you're going to get right now, you're not getting them for the long term to replace Joseph Martinez. It's a short-term replacement. And to be able to get somebody who's scored double-digit goals in his 2 full MLS seasons, it's not easy. He's had a rough spell of it in Mexico. And we see this with players sometimes that pick the wrong clubs to go to, where there's not that playing time or that guaranteed playing time, not that fit with the manager. He's bounced around in Mexico enough to where you kind of wonder, all right, is he going to be better served to come back to MLS? And this is a situation where he comes back in and he would be the de facto starter. If he gets service, I think he'll score goals in this league. He's not going to be what we saw from Joseph last year or early this season, where he's going to drop deep into the midfield and be involved in the build-up play. You feed him inside the 18, he's going to find goals for you. And you have players who can do that. You have guys who can create chances. That was one thing about Orlando and that tournament is we'll leave the game with the red card out of it for a second. The Red Bulls and Columbus games, you created 21 chances in those 2 matches. Were all of them the greatest of chances? No, but you create 21 chances, you should be finding a couple goals. Cubo Torres, if you give him chances, he's going to find goals.
He was early on in his career. He was basically the talesman for the now defunct Chivas USA team, and he was relatively prolific early on. He did a decent job at Houston as well before going to Mexico, and of course before LA United signed him. Of course, after Joseph's injury, United relied somewhat on Adam John as well. But I was just looking at the other day of his own statistics, and he's not really the most prolific striker as far as MLS, because he spent a few seasons in Columbus where he only scored, I think, 6 goals in 60 matches, which is not a real good ratio for a striker. So
Yeah, didn't get a ton of playing time at Columbus, and I was hoping to see more of him in Orlando. I was a little surprised. I mean, I think some of it was bad luck, like the game with Cincinnati. I think he could have factored in to that one as it went on, but with that early red card, you had to make the change. I would have liked to have seen him with more opportunities, but he was brought here to be a difference from
Mm-hmm.
Joseph Martinez. He wasn't brought here to be a starter. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's still the case. You know, he's a
Mm-hmm.
different player than Kubo Torres. He's a good player to have on your bench to come in late. He's
Mm-hmm.
physical. He's
Yeah.
got size. You can play
Mm-hmm.
direct to him. I
Mm-hmm.
think he could potentially pair up with Kubo Torres up top in late game situations. His one season in USL as a starter,
Mm-hmm.
he had a
Yeah.
great year last year for
Yeah.
Phoenix.
That's
So
true.
I think it's just an opportunity in finding the right fit, but his style isn't the 90 minutes a game style
Mm-hmm.
in Atlanta that I think Atlanta wants to play, but he
Mm-hmm.
can be effective off the bench.
Yeah.
You're still in that same situation. Do you want to start him in these games? I think he could have worked out, but if you've decided that he's not a starter with this group, he's
Mm-hmm.
best served as a late game sub when you need offense, then you
Yeah.
have to go get somebody. When you can get Kubo Torres on a free,
Mm-hmm.
available with no transfer fee, I think you take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, and of course, it seems like John was kind of the replica of the early version of Ken Wynn Jones and the Jacob Petersons, the
A little bit.
physical strikers that will get you the goals every now and then.
Yeah, and against some teams, he can be a really difficult matchup for opponents. But Atlanta wants to play more with the ball on the
Mm-hmm.
ground, and that's not as much of John's game. I think he's better than he gets credit there, but
Mm-hmm.
he is definitely more of that old school target number 9. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a time and a place for it, even the way Atlanta wants to play. But as a starter, maybe that's not the best fit. Maybe he is that attacking option off the bench.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's rumors, and we always heard stories about how Frank DeBoer didn't really have the best time, like with in the locker room. What do you think was the main reasons or issues that you may have noticed between DeBoer and, let's say, players like Pity Martinez or other players that may have had issues with him?
Without being in the locker room, it's speculation. We've heard what players have said in the media. We've seen what's been reported, and I haven't heard much to the contrary. So, at a minimum, you're going from Tata Martino, who created a family kind of vibe, to a very different personality in Frank DeBoer. I don't think Frank did nearly as poorly as it's been portrayed. I think the team played really well at times under him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they played well enough consistently enough. And that was the issue. I don't think he ever got the group where he wanted it to be in terms of quality. And probably part of that is down to the relationships, the chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel right. It didn't look right at times. And the Columbus game was the example for me. The second half, maybe pushed that to the back burner for me a little bit. I didn't expect Frank to be let go a few days after that tournament
Mm-hmm.
by mutual consent or any other way. I didn't expect
Mm-hmm.
that because of the way the team fought in the second half. But you could just see that things weren't right. And when you have multiple players come out and say things, it adds up. It
Mm-hmm.
adds up. And sometimes when you have a established group of players who is used to doing things one way,
Mm-hmm.
and you bring in a new manager who wants to do things differently, that friction starts from day one and it never changes. The relationship
Mm-hmm.
never improved well enough. And it's a shame because I think Frank DeBoer's getting painted with, the brush of what happened with Inter Milan and what happened
Mm-hmm.
at Crystal Palace. And those are completely different situations.
Mm-hmm.
I think here he had success.
Yeah.
I don't think he had enough success and enough of a strong relationship with the players for
Mm-hmm.
it to be long lasting. I
Yeah.
also think 2020 added to that too, just the
Yeah.
craziness of this year
Mm-hmm.
with a pandemic, with Joseph's injury, with the changes to the roster that were inevitable. You were going to have some. All of that added up to make this year even more difficult. And if the
Mm-hmm.
best thing for both sides is to move on, then that's where you're at. And I think it is.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see Frank DeBoer going next?
It's a good question. I wonder if he wants to jump back into a job or if he wants a little bit of time off. I think, and I don't know how it's going to play out in the European media, but I think he answered some of those issues that people, had with him about Palace and about Inter. I think he'll get another job in Europe. I don't know to what level. I don't know to what degree. I'm curious to see that. It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up in the Netherlands. I don't know. Ajax, is it his club? They're in good hands, so I don't
Yeah.
see anything there. But is there an opportunity elsewhere in the Netherlands? Perhaps.
Yeah.
I think there will be jobs for him. It just depends on how quickly he wants to jump back into it.
And then with current coach Stephen Glass, do you think if he happens to turn the season around for LA United, do you think LA United front office could be like, maybe Stephen Glass is the guy?
It's always a possibility. You see it every time when somebody gets the opportunity to be an interim manager or an interim coach, things can go really well. And sometimes that leads to permanent, appointments. I don't think that's the plan here. I don't think that's the plan on anybody's, part, but is it possible? Yeah, anything is. If he runs off with this team and they run off a bunch of wins and get into the playoffs and win trophies this year, then you're having a different conversation. I mean, the elements that maybe could lead you down that road is he's got to have success first off. I mean, that's got to happen. And the longer that the search goes because of the complications due to the pandemic, the more you might grow comfortable with what you have. It is an opportunity. It's an audition. It's not the plan. I mean, at a minimum, I think coming out the other side of this, Steven will be in a position in a different stature to where maybe the next time the job is open, he becomes, a candidate straight off, not just an interim candidate. But I also think he's going to draw interest elsewhere. There were rumors this summer from Dundee United in Scotland that he should be considered. I don't think it really got to the point that he was considered. It felt like more of he should be considered, but that's only going to grow. And Aberdeen is a club that Atlanta United has a relationship with. They have a manager in place right now, but if that job opened up, things could happen. So it's an opportunity for him to raise his stature, and where that leads, we'll just have to wait and see how the season goes.
And speaking of how the season will go, of course, it's been close to a couple of weeks since LA United departed from the MLS's back tournament. Now, from new coach, who are some players now that you can see having like some time to reflect that, okay, I have a point to really prove going forward. Who do you think are some of those players that needs to have a really good season specifically for the rest of this season?
I think Fernando Meza is critical. I think he had a really good start to the season and then struggled a little bit in Orlando. The defense in general was good. You gave up 3 goals in 3 games. That's not too bad at all. But the way you conceded in 2 of them was uncharacteristic. It felt like sloppy breakdowns. So Meza, you need his leadership. You need him to grow into that kind of role with this team. You need it quickly. You need him to bounce back from a tournament that was so-so at the level that I think he's at. You need to figure out what the midfield's going to look like. You have a lot of different options in Emerson Hyndman and Mo Adams and Jeff Lorenowitz and Eric Remedi and potentially Mateus Hosetu. And what's going to be the best combination in that midfield? I don't know if we've really answered that question yet. I like what you have out wide. I like Brooks Lennon. I like what he brings to the team. I like George Bello, what he brings to the team. But we'll see if the formation changes, if maybe their roles change because of that. And then you're always looking at guys like Pity Martinez and Ezequiel Barco. Those are the big names in this team. Those are the big creative players, and you need them to create. Pity had a very good match against Red Bulls. I don't think he had that match again in the tournament. Barco was banged up coming into the Red Bulls match. He came on and had a good impact, but he didn't look 100% throughout the tournament. You got to get those 2 flying, because if you have those 2 playing well, you're also going to be incorporating Jurgen Damm into this team.
Yes.
He brings you a level of speed that you don't have currently. And how are you going to use that? Is it going to be a winger in a 4-3-3? Is it going to be up top? What does it look like? You're going to find a way to play him and Kubo Torres together up top? Are you going to play him out wide? Are you going to play him as a wing back? There's a lot of different possibilities, and I want to see how he gets incorporated. So it's a really interesting time. It feels like a blank slate in a lot of ways once the season restarts, and I'm curious to see how they solve the issues that we saw in Orlando.
Yeah, and speaking of the new addition of Jurgen Damm, he, of course, many people have talked about his speed. How does he compare and contrast with the speedy player that we once had in what was his name?
Oh,
Tito.
Miguel. Miggy.
Miggy and the other
Tito. Tito Villalba.
Tito. Yes, yeah, Villalba. Yes.
Much more along the lines of Tito, in terms of being a player who thrives out wide. What I want to see from Dom is, he's got more speed, at least from what we've seen previously, than anybody Atlanta's ever had, and Miguel would be the closest one. But I want to see where he fits. He's played as a winger throughout his career. The question mark has always been service and crossing. So what is it going to look like for him if he played centrally or if he played up top? Can you find a way for his speed to be a weapon there? And can he be comfortable in those positions? Also, I think this team, that we've always talked about Atlanta United and its service from out wide, but it's not always been traditional. It's not been the old school, I guess, English way of looking at service where you're taking it down to the end line and then putting it across and letting a big forward go fight for it. You've seen a lot of passes cutting back to the top of the 18. You've seen a lot of early balls played in through the lines. You've seen a lot of different kinds of service. Can Dom thrive in those kinds of scenarios? I think what you could see happen at times is Atlanta United in the past, and I think even in the Orlando tournament, has been very right side dominant in its buildup because you had Julian Gressel in that position. You had Brooks Lennon in that position this year. And if Dom is going to be on the right, I think you'd like to be left side dominant and have Dom getting on the end of things as opposed to creating things. And if you're able to tweak the way you play a little bit to get those best things out of him, he's got a skill set that can be really effective. And sometimes you get stuck into a scenario where you're always being asked to do something that is not your strength. Let's play to his strengths.
Yeah.
He's got more pace than anybody in the league. Let's find a way to unleash that. I'll be really curious to see what Stephen Glass does with Jurgen Damm.
And then, of course, United or Atlanta United also signed the young Paraguayan forward Eric Lopez. Do we expect, or he was immediately loaned to the Twos, do we expect him to make any impact with the first team this season?
You're going to have to see some rules changes for that to happen because he's a Twos player until January 1st.
Okay.
There's been some talk that they might relax the movement back and forth between the two teams like you see in other countries where reserve players can come up and play. Maybe there's some limitation on how much or what that looks like. We'll see. He's young, and I don't think you need to rush him, especially now with Kubo Torres in the fold and Dom in the fold. Eric Lopez has not come out of nowhere, but he's played 16 professional games. He scored 4 goals with Olympia in Paraguay. He was the youngest player in their U23 Olympic qualifying team that played in January and February in South American qualification. So there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of promising things coming from him, but he's very limited in experience. So, just like we talked about in the coaching side, the pandemic making things more difficult.
Yeah.
It's got to be difficult for a teenager to move to another country on another continent and adjust to what life is like this in a pandemic where it's difficult for you and I, and we know where everything is and we know what we're doing. We know what our community's like. For somebody brand new to that, it's going to be hard. So I'm glad he's going to be with the Twos. I thought being with Stephen Glass would have been a great fit for him, but being with Tony Annan is also a great fit because Tony comes from the academy background and you're going to have people who are going to look out for him and help him get settled. Give him a little bit of time. I think in the coming years, he's going to be a really good player for this group. I like the raw talent, but moving to a new country and a new league and a new team right now has got to be difficult for anybody. I think it's even more difficult for a teenager.
And what do you make of the rumors of Jonathan Gonzalez?
It's interesting. He's not getting a ton of playing time at Monterrey. We talked about the holding midfield and all the options. He would be going in to be another option in that midfield. So what that would look like, I don't know. You'd have to clear a senior roster spot as well because you don't have one available at the moment. So there'd have to be a corresponding move. I like his talent. He needs to play somewhere. He had broken into the Mexican national team just a little bit, and right now he's not playing at Monterrey, so he's not really factoring in there. If he doesn't move here, he's got to move somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the reports were that it'd be a loan with an option to buy. That's a pretty realistic fit. He doesn't take up an international slot. So there's a lot of things to like. You just have to move somebody out to make room, and he'd have to play. Otherwise, there's no point in bringing him in to that
Mm-hmm.
crowded position group. He'd have to be coming in to play, and
Mm-hmm.
he'd have to play well.
Mm-hmm. And when somebody based on because Jurgen Damm he's not a designated player, is he?
No,
And neither would John. Do you think Jonathan Gonzalez would warrant a DP slot, or is that kind
it's
of out?
tough. I think the way you can structure the deal, at least in the short term, is like Christian Pavone did in LA Galaxy last year, where he comes in on loan. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably why that was discussed, at least in the rumors. That way, that felt accurate. Long term, if the rumored transfer prices are accurate,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be hard to keep him from being a designated player. I don't know if it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
You do have the rumors about Ezequiel Barco, and
Mm-hmm.
Ezequiel Barco, I do think will go to Europe at some point. He's too talented not to.
Mm-hmm.
But the market right now, it's so unpredictable. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you're hearing price tags for players like a Jadon Sancho that are really
Yeah,
high and
yeah.
haven't changed. But then you're seeing other players where the bottom's fallen out.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would the sale price be for an Ezequiel Barco right now? And would he have the good opportunity to go to a good place for him where he's going to get to play?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you've got to make a return on the investment that you put into
Mm-hmm.
Ezequiel Barco. So there's so many moving parts. It's so hard to call.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Gonzalez makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, but I don't think it's just as simple as signing off on that, because there's other moves that have to happen to make it fit.
Mm-hmm. All right. And if let's say, so you said that we have to, if we sign, let's say Jonathan Gonzalez, that means there's no more roster,
Right.
like senior roster spots. So somebody, do you think are there any players that could be expandable to possibly get him?
Yeah, I think there always is, and especially in this kind of market. I mean, you've got the potential for trades within the league that could open up a spot. You could trade for allocation money or cap
Mm-hmm.
space. Allocation money essentially just allows you to spend more on your cap.
Mm-hmm.
You've got possibilities, and in some of the positions that you have, you've got multiple options. So you could make moves. It's
Mm-hmm.
just going to be down to weighing the return.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be down to weighing the return on the move for the player going out versus the player coming in, and if it all adds up. You'd love to get a player like Jonathan Gonzalez, and I think if he is being looked at, you think he would fit and allow you to get better. So then who does that make expendable? That's going to be the question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, and let's see. Let's see. Oh, I was gonna get into some of the, let's say, Atlanta United two lone players that are not necessarily within the twos, like players like Lagos Kunga and Andrew Carlton. How have you been monitoring how their seasons have been going?
Yeah, a little bit. It's been tricky with USL getting back underway. Andrew Carlton's the one I've seen more of, and
Mm-hmm.
he's looked good with Indy 11. I don't think talent's an issue with Andrew at all. I think it's just getting time.
Mm-hmm.
And for both of those guys, I think they had kind of maxed out on what they could do with Atlanta United 2, because
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta United 2's role is really unique in that first team guys have to get minutes. In a normal season, this year's a little weird, but in a normal season, they've got to get minutes and be ready to play first team minutes when called upon. We saw it with Mikey Ambrose in the playoffs
Mm-hmm.
last year. It was vital that he played 10 games for Atlanta United 2 before he started in a playoff match. It paid
Mm-hmm.
off.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to give academy guys time, because you're
Mm-hmm.
weighing homegrown deals. You're weighing signing them to professional deals.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it's a Jackson Conway before he signs a pro deal, if it's George Campbell last year, those guys have to play.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes like a player like Andrew Carlton, who needs consistency and needs to be counted on to play game in, game out and deal with that pressure, he's getting squeezed both ways for minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Going to Indy's a good fit, because
Mm-hmm.
Indy is an independent team in
Yeah.
USL. They're trying to win a title, and they're
Mm-hmm.
counting on him to help lead them there. So he
Mm-hmm.
has to deal with pressure.
Mm-hmm.
He lived up to it. He's been good. He's been very creative. I think he's starting to find that balance between his incredible technique, his incredible skill, and finding the right times to use it and the right times to play simple.
Mm-hmm.
Finding that balance. And sometimes too, for a young player, and this happens everywhere around the world, it's just good to get away from home. It's
Yeah.
just good to get out on your own and have to learn how to be an adult and do
Mm-hmm.
things for yourself and fit into another group. And it seems
Mm-hmm.
like everybody at Indy has really welcomed him in. It's a good fit, and it was the right kind of loan for him. Lagos did well in Memphis, and now he's at Phoenix, which is a
Mm-hmm.
team with even more ambition.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of competition to earn playing time, and he's
Mm-hmm.
been playing.
Yeah.
He just needs to keep fighting. I think
Mm-hmm.
Lagos is a player 1v1, incredible talent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just the complete game. You want him to be good enough defensively. He doesn't have to be a world beater defensively, but you want him to be good enough. You want the
Mm-hmm.
movement off the ball to be as good as he is with the ball at his feet. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just getting that time to consistently play and push. And Phoenix is a great spot for him.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with both of those loans. And you see it with clubs all over the world. Sometimes for a Barcelona, it's better for their players to play at Barcelona B and be in
Mm-hmm.
house.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they get to a point where it's, what, we need to loan them out to see what they
Mm-hmm.
can be. And I think Andrew and Lagos were two players that fit into that category.
Mm. Do you see, like, what do you think their roles could be in 1 or 2 years time? Do you think that they'll still be within the system or
They could
still
be.
loaned out? Yeah.
They could be. Andrew, I mean, individual talent, I could see Andrew Carlton as a number 10 for an MLS team, no question. I think he's got that ability. You do have to structure a team a little bit. You want to take the defensive responsibilities off of him. You want him to be completely free. And you're seeing a lot of teams that are going away from those kinds of number 10s.
Mm-hmm.
So you want him to find and realize that. And you want him to find that balance a little bit, like I said, with Lagos, of being not great defensively, but just willing and able to put in that defensive work. That's going to get him on the field more. But playmaking talent, what we're seeing with Brendan Aronson, Andrew Carlton can be that kind of player, absolutely. So it's finding the right fit for him. And Lagos, I think, is a wide player who is great in 1v1s. I actually thought he could be a good fit for a Frank de Boer kind of team because that's the kind of players that he likes. So now, Lagos just needs to keep playing and keep developing and rounding out his game. For me, it's always been the movement off the ball.
Mm-hmm.
You just want him to be able to not create just with the ball at his feet in a 1v1 situation. You want him to be able to create making that run in behind.
Mm-hmm.
You want him to be able to affect the attack in more ways. So both of them have the potential to be MLS players with Atlanta United. Both have some room to grow to get there.
Mm. And what are couple of realistic expectations just for this season now going forward for Atlanta United?
I think getting into the playoffs is absolutely reasonable. I think making a run in the playoffs is absolutely reasonable. I think the biggest thing is changing the feel. The Orlando tournament, and there's a lot of things about the tournament that were just difficult. That 9 a.m. game is just difficult. It's brutal. You're not used to playing at 9. It's muggy. I think that was the hottest one or the second hottest one of the 9 a.m. games. It felt like hard work. The Columbus game felt like hard work. The Red Bulls game felt frustrating. The other two felt like a slog. You've got to get to where the matches don't have that feel. It needs to feel like it has in the past. It needs to feel exciting. It needs to feel like this team can score 5 goals. It needs to get back to that kind of feel. So, mentality, I think Stephen Glass will have a big impact on that, and it'll push it in that direction. You got to get into the playoffs. You got to make a run. I don't know if people are expecting this team to be an MLS Cup contender right now. That actually helps, takes a little bit of the pressure off. Can they? Absolutely. I think they have the talent to play with anybody in the Eastern Conference and anybody in the league. It's going to be harder without Joseph Martinez. Absolutely. But you've got a couple different ways to solve it. And now it's the same question that I had going into the Orlando tournament is how are you going to solve that absence? And are you going to be able to find enough attacking impact to replace Joseph Martinez? And I don't think it's a like for like, even Kubo Torres. He's not going to come in and score like Joseph, but can he help Pitti be better? Can he help Barco be better? Can he help, unlock some of the attacking potential of a Brooks Lennon, a George Bello? Those are the things I'm looking at. It's not a like for like, but can you get the amount of impact you have from Joseph across a few different players? That's where I think you have to get to. So I'm just looking for the team to play better and to get back to the way that they've been. And if they do that, the results will follow.
Yeah. As always, Jason, I appreciate having you on the show, and I hope LA United has a good rebounding of the season going forward, and we'll see how MLS carries itself out for the rest of this year.
Yeah, it's been a weird one. I hope we've got more MLS to call. I hope we've got a completion of the USL season.
Mm.
It's difficult with everybody trying to find a way to make it safe, but also finish out these seasons. So my fingers are crossed, and I'm excited that we'll get to see Stephen Glass with this team, hopefully in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I wish him all the best and all the success that he can bring to the table. But yeah, I appreciate it, Jason, and I hope you have a good rest of the week here.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, have a good one, man.
You too.
Bye.